So I am joining you today from the indigenous lands of Toronto, which are the traditional territories of many indigenous nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat peoples, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. And I am truly honored for the privilege of being able to take up space today, take up space on your screens, and take up space as part of your day. And it's truly an honor to be here. So when my family first immigrated here, though, we didn't have a lot of money. So while other kids were playing sports after school or doing all these extracurricular activities like mysterious things like playing outside, I, on the other hand, my after school activity was watching Disney movies. And even as a 31-year-old today, I still love Disney movies, and there's something about them that just like hit me right in the gut. And one of those films that really resonated with me lately is the film Moana. So for those of you who haven't yet seen this movie or just need a refresher, Moana is from Motunui, a fictional island in the Pacific. And her island ends up being hit by a blight that kills a lot of the vegetation and the fish and starves her community. So in order to help, she suggests sailing beyond the island reef in order to find new sources of food for her community. But as soon as she suggests this, people freak out and they tell her no. You can't do that. It's too dangerous. You might wind up hurting yourself. You might even wind up dead, like other people who've tried similar things in the past. But Moana, she learns that as a kid, she was actually chosen by the ocean to help her community. So despite the protests and disapproval, she decides to sail beyond the island reefs anyway. And in the end, she accomplishes her mission. She comes back and reunites with her community and ends up teaching them how to sail beyond the reefs and find new sources of abundance. So that's Moana's story. And where my story is also on an island with lots of water, the Philippines. So I was born in Malolos, Bulacan, which is a small town in the provinces. And we immigrated to Canada when I was 3 years old. I actually grew up really disconnected from my roots as a Filipina and Chinese woman. I didn't know a lot of other Filipinos my age. I was one of the few kids at school who was a person of color and grew up in majority spaces. I grew up watching TV shows that made fun of Asian people's accents and our food and our language and culture, and I just felt perpetually like I was forever foreign. Like many Asians that I know, I grew up with a sense of shame and this sense of needing to do whatever I could to fit in, which really involved for most of my life distancing myself from my Asian identity. But when I was 22 years old, I had the privilege to go back to Philippines for the first time after being away for 19 years. And I actually met family that I didn't even know existed. And I began to learn so much about myself that I didn't know. But I also learned about something really surprising, like Filipino fashion. And what I learned is that there's this amazing community of Filipino-owned fashion brands in the Philippines that are using fashion not only to create livelihood for artisans in the Philippines, but who are also using fashion as a way to celebrate Filipino culture and innovation and design. And here is a photo actually of the artisans of a fashion brand called Rags to Riches. And the artisans actually use designer bags out of fabric scraps and upcycled textiles that they source. And many of their bags have actually been featured in runways around the world. I also learned about this diverse array of Filipino jewelry that uses ancient techniques that were really unique to the Philippines. Like pictured here are jewelry pieces using gold filigree, which is a technique practiced and perfected by silversmiths on the islands, even long before the Philippines was called Philippines. There's jewelry made from local materials like kapee shells, which is what I'm wearing here, and rattan and mother of pearl, and all these materials that are so inherent and intrinsic to Philippines that I didn't know existed. So all of this got me thinking. I was like, it gave me an idea. And I was like, this is really cool. If I think this is cool, other people probably think that's cool too, right? So this is where the idea was born. How cool would it be to have a store for jewelry and bags that were all designed and handcrafted in the Philippines and that were made to share with other Filipinos? So we were so excited. We told everyone we knew, like, isn't this such a great idea? But the resounding response that we got back was, Nope. Nope. Bad idea. If you want to be a real business, people told us, you can't just focus on Filipinos. Nobody's doing that. You're never going to make any money. You'll never be taken seriously. You're never going to be a real business. If you want to be a real business, you have to go more mainstream. And the truth is, I was told this by many other Filipinos themselves. And what did I know? I was only 25 years old. I figured if everyone's saying that, then it must be true, right? So we go back to the drawing board and eventually we launch a business. Yay! Just not the business that we initially intended. Because people told us to go mainstream, and that's what we did. We launched a global marketplace that featured products from every continent, from fashion to home decor to even wellness. And for 3 years, we hustled at farmers markets and pop-ups every weekend trying to make this work. We tried to be something to everybody, and in the end, we were nothing special to nobody. And on the financial side of things, they weren't very pretty. So, in order to make ends meet, my co founder and I both juggled part time jobs. And I actually ended up working a minimum wage job as a receptionist for an entire year, where people called me girl and young lady. And it wasn't a very fun experience. But even though that wasn't great, what was even worse than the money part was this growing sense of smallness and invisibility. I felt so inauthentic selling products from countries I had never traveled to. I felt so dishonest telling stories that belonged to people I had no connection with. And I felt so disempowered serving customers who looked nothing like me. And for a really long time, I felt like I was existing as this watered down version of who I was. But during this time, I also got to thinking, because like everyone told us to go for the mainstream. And like, what the hell is the mainstream anyway, right? So I invite you to take just a few seconds to picture in your mind a sport that you think of as mainstream. Maybe the first thing that came up to you was like soccer, maybe hockey, baseball, or basketball. But did you think of cricket? Maybe you did. But if you grew up like me in North America, consuming North American media, it is very possible that cricket was not anywhere on your radar. But according to the World Atlas, cricket is actually the second most popular sport in the world with 2.5 billion fans, most of them in the UK, India, Pakistan, and Australia. And you're probably like, okay, that's cool, but what does cricket have to do with anything that I'm talking about? Because then that begs to ask the question, the mainstream according to whom? Because depending where you live, who you spend time with, what your interests are, the identities you hold, your concept of mainstream will change. The mainstream is actually a relative concept. It's not an absolute. And what may be mainstream to one group isn't mainstream or popular to another. So who gets to decide what's mainstream? And why can't I decide? The turning point. At some point in the midst of juggling part-time jobs and 5 a.m. farmers markets, I thought, if I'm going to go through the trouble of building something, then shouldn't it be something I am proud of? So after 3 years of this global marketplace, we went back to our original vision. And in 2018, we rebranded and relaunched as Cambio & Co., Filipino jewelry that connects you to the homeland. So we actually let go of all of our products that weren't made in the Philippines, and we chose to focus only on Filipino jewelry and bags that were handcrafted and designed in the Philippines to celebrate Filipino craftsmanship, culture, and heritage. But even more important than the products themselves that we were selling was more important were the stories, because we began to center Filipino stories that served Filipino customers. And we began to publish things like a love letter to my Filipina nose, how Filipino families express love without words, and body shaming in Filipino families, and how to gently call in your loved ones. And we were sharing these kinds of stories, wondering if it would work, because we had never seen anyone do anything like this before. Would anyone even want to read that? We didn't know if it would fail, but I figured, I'd rather fail as my real self than succeed pretending to be someone else. So 3 years later, surprise, we didn't fail. We actually grew. a lot. And from when we officially rebranded to Cambio & Co. to today, we have since reached 25,000 social media advocates around the world, 15 countries that are over 3,000 customers call home, and we've scaled to multiple six figures as we move year over year, growing from just two as myself and my co-founder to now a core team of six across 2 time zones and operating multiple cities. And in 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, when businesses were closing down left and right, we actually created employment, and we were able to send back $75,000 worth of livelihood, which represents livelihood for 275 traditional artisans in the Philippines, majority of whom identify as women. And then just when you thought we couldn't be any further from the mainstream, we launched a sister company in 2019 called Cinta & Co., focused only on Filipino weddings. And surprise, again, Cinta & Co. has even outpaced our first company in only 2 years. So I share this story because my story is proof that embracing your differences is profitable. We would never have made it here if we continued trying to be a global marketplace just like everyone else. And instead, we got here only once I had the courage to be who I was, to be courageously different. And the more I look around, the more I realize there are so many stories like mine, and some of them you've probably already seen it, like Black Panther, which is a film that, of course, doesn't just have Black characters, but puts Black stories front and center. And a film that almost didn't get made because executives were concerned that a Black-led superhero movie wouldn't ever perform at the box office. But if you follow the news, Black Panther smashed so many records, including being the highest grossing solo superhero film of all time in the US. Another example is Walker & Company, founded by Tristan Walker, who started his journey after checking out the beauty and grooming aisles and just being super frustrated that there was such a lack of quality products that were made for people of color, particularly people who had coarse or curly hair. And so he designed those products and launched brands that cater to people of color. And since then, they've actually been acquired by Procter & Gamble for millions of dollars, making Tristan Walker the very first Black CEO under the P&G umbrella. A lesser known example, but is equally awesome, is Heckin Unicorn, which is actually a brand based in Singapore. And they are a queer-owned brand that specializes in accessories with subtle LGBTQ+ designs, and they are made specifically for people who are still closeted, but who want to express their identities and their pride in who they are while still protecting their safety. Heckin Unicorn became a successful company by turning an experience, by turning something that's supposed to shame them into something that was powerful instead, and were able to succeed while doing it. But there's something else here, because money is one thing, but something that I began to realize after we launched as Cambio & Co. is that not only did we grow our sales and our followers, we also began to see comments like these popping up on our Instagram account. Comments, actually this one is just from a few weeks ago, saying things like, "Your posts have been so inspiring, eye-opening, and convicting in many ways, and have helped me in my journey of embracing my culture and sharing it with my kids. Thank you, and keep up the great work." I realized that Cambio & Co., we weren't just making content and we weren't just selling products. We were actually empowering people, other Filipinos, to feel proud of who we were, to embrace our identities, and to just love ourselves, so we no longer have to feel ashamed of our culture. And films like Shang-Chi, which is the first Asian-led superhero movie in Marvel, has done the same thing, helping kids feel seen and feel proud and represented of being Asian instead of ashamed, the way I felt. But I also want to make it clear that embracing what makes you different doesn't just mean our racial or our gender identities. Here's an example with Introvert Dear, which is the largest online community for introverts in the world, and they've got over 185,000 followers on Instagram, and their mission is to help introverts thrive in an extroverted world. And I just had to say, as myself, as an introvert and a highly sensitive person and an INFJ and all that awesome stuff, their articles have helped me feel so much less alone, so much less weird for just wanting to be alone, and just less different in a bad way. Owning what makes you different empowers others to do the same. Because when we tell stories that center our differences and that truly celebrate who we are, this is a radical act. We are radically taking up space with our stories and our voices by helping others feel represented and validated and connected in deep ways. But I also have to tell you, it's fucking hard to be different. There's a reason that it's hard, because there are people and systems who purposely and intentionally make it hard for us to show up as our full selves and to be different. They want us to conform and be the same. And the truth is that many times the people who try to discourage us from being different are also people we love, people who want to keep us safe, people in our own community. Like Moana's community, who tried to discourage her from going beyond the island barriers because they were afraid of what would happen to her. And like my Filipino community, who wanted to keep me safe because they know all too well how scary it is to be different. But like Moana, who was chosen by the ocean to lead her community to abundance, what if you could be the chosen one for your community? What if that voice inside you that's always told you you're too different is really a call for you to embrace those differences unapologetically and to lead your community to abundance instead? Will you answer the call? Thank you.